pinpoint WrestleMania 5 as the very beginning of my true wrestling fandom. I was a mere 4 years old. Some of my earliest memories are of watching wrestling matches with my older brothers and my dad. I remember being a huge fan of Sting almost concurrently around this time. But even more than that, I remember being absolutely entrenched in the storyline between Macho Man Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan. Like mentioned in my previous video in the series, this was for all intents and purposes the second part of a two-part WrestleMania that took place over 2 years, held once again at Trump Plaza in Atlantic City, New Jersey. WrestleMania 5 would be a pivotal moment in the WrestleMania timeline, as the previous year's show had garnered the lowest viewership interest since the franchise began. Vince McMahon would hedge his bets on a show called The Mega Powers Explode. This is the story of WrestleMania 5. Before we get started, as always, folks, please leave a like on this video, sub to the channel if you're new here, hit the bell and all that good stuff. Pro Wrestling Planet is a one-man show hosted by yours truly. My name is The Brand. Thank you in advance. Let's get into it. We left off WrestleMania 4 with the culmination of Randy Savage as the WWF champion. Savage was endorsed by Hulk Hogan to close out the show, and the two would team through the rest of 1988 as the Mega Powers. The duo would headline the SummerSlam show that year as a tag team. However, something would always seem amiss with Savage, and naturally, Savage was almost overprotective of his valet and real-life spouse, Miss Elizabeth. These tensions would come to a height on the aforementioned episode of Saturday Night Main Event in February of 1989. The stage was set for another tag match where the Mega Powers teamed up against Akeem and the Big Boss Man. This match contained a spot where Miss Elizabeth would take a bump on the outside and be rushed back to the dressing room by Hulk Hogan, while Savage was left to fend for himself for a minute. And when Hogan returned, Savage slapped Hogan and walked out on him. Hogan still manages to get the victory solo, and then all hell breaks loose backstage as Savage unloads on Hogan, and the main event for WrestleMania 5 was set. The rest of the card was pretty loaded with matches, another 13 matches to be exact. The buffer match between main events was a match between the Red Rooster and Bobby Heenan. This whole thing is strange to look back on. Terry Taylor as the Red Rooster was always a cringy gimmick, and to see Heenan working with not only him but the perennial jobber, the Brooklyn Brawler, just a very weird thing that I had somehow blocked from my memory. Bad News Brown and Jim Duggan also wrestled to a DQ in the intermittent, and this match made sense for the time, as Bad News was a solid mid-card heel and Jim Duggan was a solid mid-card babyface. From there, we have what many consider the second main event on the card between Ultimate Warrior and Rick Rude for the Intercontinental Championship. Warrior and Rude had competed in the Super Pose Down at the Royal Rumble in January of 1989, which, when Warrior had a sneaky foothold by Bobby Heenan, who was Rick Rude's manager, caused Rude to win the belt, albeit in controversial fashion. The Hart Foundation defeated the team of Rhythm and Blues, the Honky Tonk Man and Greg Valentine. This furthered the ascension of the Harts, who would eventually land Jimmy Hart as their manager and become one of the main tag teams in the company. From there, we had Jake Roberts defeat Andre the Giant by DQ. And this feud was interesting, as the main idea was that Andre the Giant was scared of Jake's snake. This was a moment that could have really made Jake, but didn't really end up doing that. Andre would make it to one more WrestleMania match, one more WrestleMania appearance. This is credited, however, as Andre's last singles match at the show of shows. The Brain Busters team of Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard made their WrestleMania debut by defeating Strikeforce, the team of Tito Santana and Rick Martel. Dino Bravo defeated Ronnie Garvin. The Demolition successfully defended their tag team titles against the WWF's other Road Warriors clone tag team, the Powers of Pain. Mr. Perfect also defeated the Blue Blazer, rest in peace Owen Hart. The Bushwhackers defeated the Rougeos. Brutus Beefcake and Ted DiBiase ended in a double countout. Another case of the mighty falling here. Ted DiBiase, who was essentially the lead heel in the WrestleMania the year prior, was smashed all the way down the card here, but he did get to work with Beefcake, who was massively over at the time. Also, the Twin Towers beat the Rockers in Shawn Michaels' WrestleMania debut that he would probably assume to forget about. And the show, last but not least, opened with the showdown between Hercules defeating King Haku. Notable here that Haku inherited the King gimmick just before Savage and right after Harley Race. In the end, WrestleMania 5 rebounded the franchise in a huge way. The buy rate for the show skyrocketed back up to around 760,000 buys, which if you compare WrestleMania 4's buys of 175,000, this was a dramatic increase to say the least. The attendance held up the same as the year before, as it was held in the same arena mentioned. This show, like I mentioned earlier, was the first big angle I ever remember happening in wrestling. I watched the Savage turn on Hogan live on television, and it forever changed the way that I viewed pro wrestling, as it contained a level of drama that as a child I saw on the level of blockbuster movies. Through 1989, we would witness the continued rise of the Ultimate Warrior, and how that ended up the biggest match, but also probably the biggest blunder in WrestleMania history. But that, of course, is a story for a whole other video. Well, that's it. That is the quick rundown of WrestleMania 5 in a nutshell. This show altogether, not a very exciting one to watch back. There's a couple key points here, but single main event, everything else just kind of feels a little bit subpar. If you want to go back and watch this WrestleMania, Savage and Hogan is definitely a good watch. Everything else on the card, though, super forgettable in my opinion. But this is the time where I turn it over to you, the viewers. I want to hear from you guys down in the comments. I want to know your memories and favorite matches of WrestleMania 5. And I will mention here, since I neglected to mention it in the video itself, the Roddy Piper segment where he fire extinguishes Morton Downey Jr. was definitely a memorable segment and probably one of my favorite Piper's Pits of all time. That's really it. Let me know that stuff down there. Until next time, this has been your excellent friend, The Brand. I want to thank you for watching. Please make sure to subscribe to the channel, and we can see you next time on Pro Wrestling Planet.
Yo, it's your boy JTG, aka Jay the God, one half of the illest tag team ever, Crime Time, and you are watching Pro Wrestling Planet. And we all know Pro Wrestling Planet is about that money. Yeah, that money. Yeah. Cheer.